Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activist speakers and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 260 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we're talking about cowardice, deep healing, and being dead with my friend Karen Hawkwood. Karen is one of those people I've never met in real life, but somehow have a deep kinship with. I love the way this woman's mind and heart come together to articulate the nuance and complexity of life's realest issues. Her big truth was that most people are cowards, meaning that most people are not in integrity. And from there we discussed cowardly moments, how to actually do integrity, so what it looks like, what we give, and how to turn our insights on ourselves. We talked about establishing a relationship to that which is beyond, her definition of forgiveness, which includes an important distinction between responsibility and accountability. And from there, I was curious about her opinion on the difference between shame and accountability. This is something I observe online a lot. We talked about how anger and hurt protect us from each other, a full spectrum view of death and rebirth processes that includes the dying and being dead part, which most people don't talk about as much. And we also got into grief, identity, and more. This one is definitely a listen more than once type of episode. Take some notes, invite your friends, and take your time to process this conversation. We went super deep here. So enjoy this. The show notes can be found over at untameyourself.com/TT-260. That's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -260. And if you have not yet checked out our new Wild Soul offerings over on our Patreon page, head on over to patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. I am super excited about this. There's 6 different levels for you to either simply support the podcast in staying ad-free, to receiving some bonus podcast episodes a couple times a month, some Wild Soul Movement sessions that I'm doing live with the community, a community forum for you to get to know and interact with each other, where you can discuss all of the extra content over there on the Patreon, as well as these weekly podcast episodes. So it's a really fun, really amazing way for our global community to connect with each other, and for me also to be able to connect with you all and get to know you better. So again, that link is Patreon, Patreon.com patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. Now let's get into the conversation with Karen. Everybody, this is a conversation that was inevitably going to happen, but it was just a matter of finding the right inspiration, the right moment, and the right topic. So I'm super pumped to have my friend KJ with us today. How are you doing, KJ?
I am so good. I'm so happy to be here with you.
It's going to be really juicy. So before we were chatting a little bit offline before I hit the record button, we were catching up a little bit. And KJ said, you know me, nuance, complexity, context. Like you are getting a couple of real geeks coming together to talk about the things today, people listening. So
it's true.
This will definitely be one of those episodes you need to listen to more than once and like take some notes and then come back and like, oh man, I get that now. So first question, what is a truth that is having a big impact on your life right now?
The truth that's having the biggest impact on my life right now, from everywhere from personal to global, the polite way to say it is that most people are not in integrity. The blunt way to say it is that most people are cowards.
Let's go with the blunt way.
Okay.
So say more.
And I really don't mean that as a judgment.
Right.
You know, I mean, it can sound like that. I have been facing into my own cowardice, my own cowardly moments. And the summary, you know, I have this whole big thing that I'm developing. I'll insert this parenthetically. I started down this trail when I began to realize how many of us use the word forgiveness and we're all talking about different things. People mean about 67 different things by that word. But because we're all using the same word and we don't have the vocabulary around it, we're having different conversations and we don't know that we are.
Okay.
I think it's a huge issue. So that's a piece. But when we come into integrity, which is a variable thing and it's an in-process thing, we have to really see the places where we've got to be willing to give something up. So in social justice conversations, when we start to come into really being willing to see our own white supremacy and our own unconscious racism, we have to give up the privilege that comes with that. People don't want to do that.
Right.
On a personal level, in a situation, I went through a shattering breakup a couple of years ago, and a lot of the people in our community, even though there was no hatefulness, and I am grateful for that, a lot of the people that had been common in our community exited my life.
Yeah.
At their choice, right? He wasn't making them. I wasn't making them. But I was too much of a truth teller. And for them to really honor and acknowledge the truth of what I was saying, they would have had to give up what the relationship that they had with him, not because they were taking my side, but because it wasn't in their integrity.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, I'm not trying to say it was the same thing. It's not. It's a vastly different scope. But all the people who stayed working for Weinstein when they knew exactly what he was doing, for them to be in integrity with themselves, they would have had to give up the privilege that they had, the money, the power, the influence, the ability to make the movie they wanted to make. And it sounds super harsh, but they were cowards.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're linking, I don't know that I've ever consciously made the link between cowardice and integrity. But as you're saying it, it's making so much sense to me because in the last, I want to say roughly year, I have actually given up so much, specifically in my business, because there are things that I became aware of that are out of integrity for me. Marketing practices, a lot of those implicit biases that you were talking about, staying silent about things because I didn't know any better. That was a privilege, right? I had to take the time to know better. And then once I did, I'm like, damn, I can't, this has to be, if I'm going to talk about reclaiming and redefining womanhood, I have to include all of the intersections of that. Like I can't leave things out and think I'm doing any kind of good work in the world. So this is a lot. My income took a big hit in the last year.
Yeah.
That was I'm reorienting around that and coming up with new ways to serve people and hold space. There's just stuff I didn't understand. And I share that so people listening, this isn't like a finger pointing. Like you're a coward. Kind of like you were saying, it's not a judgment. It's just when we get to these places, these are the rubber meets the road moments where you make the higher choice or you don't. That's the part I don't have judgment for, but I know where I stand on those things. It's hard.
That's the thing. I'm a coward too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I hold myself, I really work hard when I get these insights. If I think I have a sudden insight about another person or about culture or whatever, I turn it on myself.
Yeah.
Like that's the very first thing I do. And I'm not exempt from shadow and I'm not exempt from my own bullshit. I would not even begin to say that I am, but I try to have as little cognitive dissonance as possible, right? Where this is happening over here and that's happening over there. And I just kind of keep a clutch in between them.
Yeah.
But when you know, this is the metric I'm using for myself right now. When I come to an uncomfortable truth, if I have two choices, I have to give something up, but what I get for it is being all one piece. I am all one with myself, or I can put the clutch back in and I can keep this thing over here and that thing over there, because if I bring them together, the gears are going to grind.
Yeah.
And so those are my choices. Either I put the clutch back in, and that's what most of us do. I've done it before. I'm sure that I will do it again. When I say cowardice, that's really what I'm talking about, is we have a choice to either give up something that brings us pleasure, power, safety, influence, whatever it is we think we want, in order to be one thing, in order to have our gears all line up.
Yeah.
Or we pull them apart again and then we pay the price for that. And that's the thing that I've been learning is most people are paying the most horrendous price
it's
for
expensive.
being out of integrity. But that's normal. That's not only how they've always been, it's how everyone around them is. It's how our entire culture is.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know the value of being all one thing, which is what integrity really means. And they see the price of giving up. Like in the Weinstein example, those people saw the price of giving up being able to make the movies they want, but they didn't see the value of not having to lie and condone violence and abuse every single day of their lives.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. So people are used to that. And that's the part that I get. Sometimes I get a little despairing about that, is how can we help people see the value, the true benefit of not lying?
I'm really glad you used
taking the hit.
I'm really glad you used the word despair there, because that's exactly, there have been so many things that I've reflected on in the last year, and that is just the most accurate word to describe. And for so many years, maybe call it the ignorance of youth, I never felt like there was any possibility that I would not achieve or fulfill my purpose, what I'm here on earth to do.
You are a powerful person, and you always have been.
And I've hit moments of doubt for the first time, again, in the last year, of being I don't know if the forces, for lack of a better term, the forces of evil might be way stronger than the forces of good on this planet. I don't believe that. For anyone listening, don't worry. I don't believe that. But there are moments when I'm it just feels
real.
like pushing a boulder up a hill.
Yeah. Yep. And I think for me, a lot of where I've gotten insight into this is through the very barest beginnings of my understanding of my own ignorance and my own cowardice in embedded racism. And when I really even begin to get a glimpse of what people of color are dealing with, living with, and certainly the activists who are leaning everything they've got on that boulder, what they live with every day. Woo.
Yeah.
And so again, I keep coming back. I have two choices. I can stay with that, and I can do, this is a concept that I've really worked a lot with from my teacher, Fabeku Fatunmije, which is capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And capacity is not just forcing, right? It's not that kind of distorted yang energy where you just push harder, like our culture loves to teach us to do. But it's kind of growing this capacity from this deep root of us to be able to handle the truth that we are folding into our integrity.
Oh my God. To be able to handle the truth that we are folding I'm writing it down as I'm saying it, if anyone's listening, to be able to handle the truth that we are folding into our integrity. So good.
And that's the capacity, that capacity to enlarge ourselves, to build our complexity, to take this thing on board, to make it part of us without it just dropping us. That's the thing people don't know how to do, and that's what leads to the cowardice. That's what leads to putting the clutch back in, because people look at that truth that's coming at them and they're like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's too big. It hurts too much. And it forces me into my complexity. It forces me to deepen and expand my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know how. Our culture not only doesn't provide us with the skills to do that, it literally robs us of them.
Literally.
Literally.
Oh, man.
Robs us of them.
So,
don't do that. Be a paper doll. Be nice and neat. Fit into the space,
I'm curious where do you think a spiritual practice plays the role here? And let me tell you why I'm going to ask that question. When it comes to capacity, and again, this is also kind of like your comment about cowardice. This isn't a judgment, because I'm sure there's people, probably the majority of the people who listen to this show believe in something. They probably all call it different things, but probably believe in some form of higher power, higher being, universal energy, God, or whatever. But I personally, even as I was raised Catholic, I left religion, I never stopped believing that there was something. I just had to reorient my relationship and definition to it and of it. So I really just don't know how people who don't have that in their life expand or increase their capacity. Because one of the things that has helped me increase my capacity is knowing that I can surrender things to something much more powerful than me. And whether maybe I have one friend who believes that we're actually just projecting our own power onto something else because we can't even comprehend how magnificent we are. But what do you think about that? Do you think it's easier for people with a spiritual practice or belief or connection, or no? Or something in between? I'm sure your answer is something in between.
As always. You were right there with me.
I was like, wait a minute. I did not just ask this person an either or question.
I'm always going to be like, and there's a third way, and we're going to go down that way. Here's where I see the difference, Elizabeth, is it really has everything to do with the motives behind your relationship with that which is greater or that which is beyond. There for some folks, and this is not a judgment, it's just an observation, really, truly, that's more of a source of comfort.
Yeah.
And a sense of not being alone.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. If there is, I'm only in this middle of this lifelong process of coming to understand the destitution of white culture. Mm-hmm. And that feeling of being alone, of being isolated and unconnected in that fundamental human way is so profound. So profound. So there's an intermediate level. This is related to what I want to say here about our relationship to spirit, to whatever that which is beyond. And that's the village. And in most Western culture, we are missing the village. And the village is an incredible source of support and connection and being held and not being alone that I really think we lack, and I think we miss it. I think we have it in ourselves that should be there, and it's not. And so for most of us, it's not. And so sometimes I think we kind of push that need onto the others, capital O others, as well. Now, my relationship with the others, which is how I talk about it, and again, I get that very much from my teacher, but they hold me accountable in some very uncomfortable ways at times. So as profound as my relationship to the others is, it is always a loving relationship. It is not always a comfortable relationship.
Yeah.
Because they pull me up into where I'm headed. Like, they're way less interested in where I've been.
Yeah.
And they're way less interested in my excuses and my desire to stay comfortable and small and all that. They're like, we love you, and bullshit.
Yeah.
This is what we see. This is what we see is true. This is what we know is calling you, is available for you. What are you going to do about that? And so that relationship with spirit, I find to be a profound source of me getting deeper into my integrity. And it's not just, I say that like it's a hierarchy, and it's not. It's a diversity of relationships with that which is more.
I took a screenshot of something yesterday. I'm just pulling this up. It said, just wait until you see why God had you wait. What God is doing beyond what you could ever pray for or think of. Mm-hmm. And I was like, damn!
Yes. That's the thing. The other or others, they know what we really are.
Yeah.
And all the ways we hide from ourselves and all the shucking and jiving, they don't. They're like, psh. Like, why are we even bothering with that?
Yeah.
So the sense of help, I mean, just flat out help, is incalculable. So going back to what you said about having something to just give stuff to, mm-hmm. Be like, I cannot do this all myself.
Yes.
I think that's imperative. The idea that we're supposed to do it all ourselves is complete distortion.
And just even like you said, calling in the idea of the village and community.
Yeah.
Is like, we're just not built that way biologically. Like, we're just like, in no way, mentally, emotionally, spiritually fit. Like, literally, there is nothing about how we're put together as human beings that we're supposed to do things on our own. This is the reason why I hate the saying self-made, because it's just not. It's
never true.
Misnomer. No one is self-made. I get what it's supposed to mean, and I don't care because I love language.
Yes.
And I want people to stop saying that.
Yes, and we have enshrined that sense of being captains of our own destiny, being completely independent from influence in Western culture to a point that's nauseating. It's and we're living in the results of it.
We're living in the friggin' results of it.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right.
Yeah.
I gotta come back.
Okay.
I want to. Let me hone in on, you said something about forgiveness. I want to know how you define it. Let's start there. How do you define forgiveness? And then I'll tell you mine.
Okay. So I'm going to try not to go into the multiplicity of branchings that this project has taken me into. We may go there, but I'm just warning you.
Okay.
So where I go, when I'm trying to untangle this sense that we're all using the same word and meaning different things, I go to etymology.
Yeah.
Right? I go to the root meaning of the word. Here's what's quite fascinating about this to me, Elizabeth, because we understand the term in this way in a very specific context, but when we pull it out of that context, we lose the meaning. Mm-hmm. The actual root meaning of the word forgiveness, and there's 3 parts to this, is to absolve an unpaid debt. So there's 3 pieces.
So that's like loan forgiveness.
Yep. And we use it in a financial context to mean exactly what it means.
Yeah.
But when we move it into a psycho-spiritual context, we go completely off the rails. My take. So there's layered in all of these different concepts. And this is what I'm starting to tease out what people mean when they talk about it. A lot of people use forgiveness as a contrast or an antidote to blame.
Okay.
So if you're not blaming someone, which means you're making them completely responsible for whatever the injury, and I'm using this term injury now as a broad term for the instances in which forgiveness might need to be applied. So whatever the injury that happened, it's their fault. And they're a horrible human being. So we've got not only accountability, we've got shame and judgment. That's all wrapped up in blame. So if we're not going to blame, then we should forgive. Really? Really? Like, that feels like either or to me. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when people are using the word forgiveness, what they're talking about is finding the place of compassion, which I think is the real antidote to blame.
Mm-hmm.
It's a being able to see the truth of the other person's experience enough, right? To where you can come out of that posture of blame and hate and judgment and condemnation. Now, another concept that's laced in through here, which I think is really critical, is what I call accountability, which I like that term better than responsibility for whatever reason. It's also a little different etymologically, right? Responsibility is the ability to respond. Okay. But accountability kind of goes back to this same financial root, which I find very interesting. And it's very uncomfortable for a lot of us in the psychospiritual world to kind of work with this idea of debt. I mean, a lot of people will absolutely just lose their shit completely when you start to talk about debt in this context. But I think that's what accountability points back to. And this goes back to your point earlier, as I've been kind of tuning into your work even more recently about the difference between intention and impact.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You have accountability for your impact. So does the other person, because impact is an intersection between you and them.
Mm-hmm.
So accountability, when we're in a posture of blame, we're not in a clear perception of accountability, because it's never just one person's accountability. But forgiveness. So when I deconstruct it this way, the true experience, what I believe to be the true experience of forgiveness, which is absolving, wiping out, writing off an unpaid debt. So there's been an injury. There's accountability that's owed. There's accountability that's undealt with.
That's
what
debt.
the debt means.
Got it.
It has never been attempted to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
There has never been motion towards cleaning up and handling the accountability for that debt. And we get to a place, but I think this only happens through grace. Mm. I really do. I think it's one of the deepest mysteries of the human experience, when something happens, and I don't know what it is, where we can just say, no, actually, that one's done.
Yeah.
The injury is still there. It's still owed. It has never been paid, but I'm writing it off the books.
Yeah.
Like, really, because I see a lot of people think that they've done that. And all you have to do is scratch about a 1/4 inch down. And all the hurt, all the judgment, all the resentment, all the fury, all the injury just comes vomiting up to the surface again. That's not true forgiveness.
No. I love this. So I saw a sign in a bathroom in Joshua Tree once that said, "Forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past."
Tell me more about what that means to you.
To me, that aligned with my definition of forgiveness, which really includes kind of what you were saying, just in a different way. Mm-hmm. We're not letting anyone off the hook for a thing that they did that wasn't okay. But what we are doing is going, I'm no longer willing to give my power and energy to that thing.
Right. So that to me is not forgiveness. That's the thing that's so interesting.
Oh, okay. So what is that to you?
It's compassion. It's stepping out of the posture of blame. Because compassion, partly what happens with blame is we give our happiness, our contentment over to that injury and to that injurer. Like, everything becomes about that hurtful thing that happened and the person we believe did it. And that is devastating. It's absolutely toxic. I understand why we've tried real hard to find ways to kind of not do that.
Yeah.
But remember, forgiveness is absolving.
Yeah. Wow. So
when we don't let people off the hook, and I think rightfully so, to be clear, I think holding people accountable is an act of love. Mm-hmm. We are being in a posture of compassion for both of us.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of people do what I heard somebody call, I can't remember, this might have been a Jeff Foster thing or something, but premature forgiveness. And I literally threw my hands up and shouted, because it was such an acknowledgement of something I'd never heard anybody say before, we try to force ourselves into that absolution, into that writing off. And we cannot do it. I truly believe that forgiveness is not something we can make happen. I do think we can make ourselves more available for that grace. I think we can do all the work we can do on our side. We can find that place of compassion where we're not letting this injury or the person or people involved take us away from our truth and our center and our power and being able to move forward. But neither are we letting go of the accountability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what I call carrying. You know, I've worked into this place where it's like, okay, if I'm not in a place where the grace of forgiveness, the mystery of forgiveness has occurred, and I don't want to be in the posture of blame because that just sucks for everybody and it keeps me from moving forward, to your point exactly.
Yes.
Then what do? Well, I'm not going to do premature forgiveness. I'm not. That's just as toxic. I'm not going to say it's okay that I've written it off when that's not really true. But I'm not going to blame them, and I'm not going to become obsessed and kind of do a tar pit thing with what happened. So what's my alternative? Well, this injury is still here. It's still part of me. And I want to move. I want to move forward. So I have to carry it. How do I carry it? And that's a whole nother thing that I will not go into because I could talk your ear off. This is the center of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And well, this is why one of the reasons why I always say as well that forgiveness happens in layers over time.
Yes.
And
couldn't agree more.
But I never inserted that grace that you're talking about, because that is true. There are just days when you wake up and you're like, oh, that thing doesn't have a hold on me anymore.
That's the thing. It's like truly, truly gone.
Yeah.
You know, tell me about your experience. Tell me about the people you know, because my observation of it is that that's comparatively rare, not like vanishingly rare, but you know, because there really is no charge left.
No charge left. Yep.
It's not buried. You're not band-aiding it. You're not putting spiritual platitudes over it. It's truly, truly, there's no soreness all the way down.
All the way down. Like, no one could pluck that string.
There isn't anything there.
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. And what most people think is forgiveness is a skin of some kind over a tremendous amount of undealt with, uncleaned up hurt and anger. Yeah. And that means it hasn't been absolved. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But let's call it what it is.
And I always say, I really think that for most people, the biggest barrier to forgiveness is the unprocessed anger.
Yeah.
Because we can't. So in Wild Soul Movement, the surrender and release is the first topic, and we work on letting things go. And there's a lot of people who are like, I'm not ready to forgive. I'm not ready to forgive you. And I'm like, cool. What are you angry about? And they're like, oh. I'm like, because if we try to jump to the forgiveness part when we haven't gone through like the bottom of the anger barrel, I don't even think forgiveness is available.
I don't think it's anywhere in the vicinity. There's no question.
Yeah.
There's no question. I think that it's the intersection of the anger and the hurt. And there's the anger often protects us from the hurt, or sometimes the hurt protects us from the anger. Right? The intersection between those is interesting. But they both will remain until they are done. And there's two ways they can be done. Either the debt can be paid, and this doesn't happen often, but it can happen. And I think it's important for us to both ask for that and to make ourselves available for cleaning things up with people. Mm-hmm. And because that is one way that forgiveness can happen. And this, like, we see this in like restorative justice processes where people are working with the families of people where they've killed someone, you know, and they're actually coming to a kind of reconciliation with the people who are still here who have been so deeply injured. It's happened, you know, there's all kinds of models for it. And I'm quite fascinated with that because I think we could transform our world quite profoundly if we were all more able to do that. But then there's also the point at which we just kind of, through grace, we're like, it's not there anymore. Like, there's really nothing there. But we can't wait for that. We can't just sit around waiting for the grace to happen. and we can't bypass. I think if we bypass, to your point, there's a huge problem. So, okay, here's the anger, here's the hurt. How do I metabolize?
Yeah.
How do I keep digesting what's there? And I think there are some injuries that we really do carry for a really long time, if not forever.
Yeah.
And that's something none of us want to think about or hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's an unsexy topic in our world. I think that's a problem because I think it happens to a lot of people. You know?
Yeah. And I think it's part of self-acceptance. You know, something I've realized recently as I date now. I was going to say I started dating, but I started dating in February. It's May. Like, I date now.
Check your verbs.
Okay. Yep. So I date now. And you know, I've met a couple of great guys. But one of the things that I really have noticed is there are fundamental things about who I am and how I operate that I'm just always going to be carrying.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be carrying that, like, harmony in relationships is a top priority to me. So people who play games and do the, like, I'm not going to call you for 3 days or make you wait till the last minute to make a plan or like whatever, that's just not going to work for me because I care about myself too much to go through that torture. Like, and to me, it really registers as torture. Other people might be like, what's the big deal? Or lean back into your feminine and surrender. And like, I want to punch you in the throat.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think it's, for me, because this is my orientation, there's a huge difference between a mismatch or a kind of a collision of archetypal nature.
Yep.
Who we really are down at that bone level. And then all the distortion and dysfunction that's gotten built around those bones.
Yeah.
Because there are people who really do have an archetypal nature that is totally appropriate for them, where they need a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
And they need that kind of spontaneous, last minute, driving by the seat of the pants way of being. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't work for you, wouldn't work for me. But when they get caught up in the shadow of that archetypal structure, then it's a game playing. It's a way to preserve control, resist engagement.
Yep.
All of that. So there's kind of 2 layers of the stuff going on there, and you're feeling into both of them. On one level, you're like, this is actually game playing. Like, this is actually a kind of screwed up dynamic that I'm not part of. But below that, we just may not be compatible.
And that's the thing. It's just not compatible. I mean, I feel like we've said this 100 times in this interview, or like 6. But again, these things aren't judgments. It's just like, these are the facts. Like, if I'm going to look down the list of like things that work for me and things that don't, and how you show up, I got to go, oh, that's not going to be compatible. And I don't need to like bend over backwards trying to make some of these things work, because actually these other 17 things are compatible. If like the 1 or 2 things that aren't are so excruciating for me, I got to go.
Yeah. There is a hierarchy of places where we don't line up.
Yeah.
And above, there's sort of a, like, I mean, there's more than one line. It's not just above the line, below the line, but you know, like, so like for me, truth telling, you know, and there's a kind of emotional intensity and rawness to being a truth teller. And if that's not going to fly for somebody, and they're not interested in telling themselves the truth about what's really going on with them, and therefore being willing to tell me the truth, that is such a non-starter. I can't even tell you. And of course, I've had my despairing moments and my painful stories about that, meaning I'll be single for the rest of my life.
Same.
But I catch that for what it is. And I'm like, nope, because I have friends and colleagues and people in community who are deep truth tellers. And they're not people who I would be able to partner with, but they show me that it's possible.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I get that. And I don't think we do ourselves any favors when we try to, like you said, contort around that incompatibility.
Yeah.
That's a betrayal of ourselves.
That's a huge betrayal of ourselves and nature. So I look at nature a lot and I go, what can we learn from nature? Listen, this olive tree outside my window isn't trying to be a rose bush.
Yep. And she's not weeping every night because she's not a rose bush. And trying to grow. I mean, she grows thorns because olive trees grow thorns, right? But like trying desperately to grow blossoms so that no.
So I don't need to try to be a person that's like, oh, yeah, sure. Make me wait till Friday to know what we're doing Friday night.
Nope.
Sure.
And the more you know about that and the clearer you are about that with yourself, the more you can give people coming into your life, whether they're a potential partner or a new friend or a business colleague or whatever, the one-on-one on you. You know,
Yeah.
This is what I know about myself. I would love to know what you know about yourself. You know, like one of my great challenges of my nature, and I've been talking with a bunch of clients this way lately about this, that we impute motive from behavior.
Ooh.
We see someone's behavior and we instantly jump to what they meant by it. I have a particular client I'm working with right now, and he's really struggling with, if you loved me, you would do this, or
Right.
if you do this, it means you don't love me. And we've been deconstructing that because I'm late a lot. I get super caught up in my life. I'm not making excuses, but I just am kind of always like so engaged with what I'm doing that it's hard for me to break out of it and go get in the car and go somewhere. There are certain people for whom I would not be. I'm working on it. Like, I'm taking responsibility for that in myself, but I also will draw the line at them saying, well, obviously you don't respect me, because if you did, you'd show up on time. And I'm like, no, actually, you can say it doesn't work for me. I need you to be on time. If you're going to be part of my life and we're going to make dates together, you cannot show up 5 to 25 minutes late. That's not okay.
Yeah.
But don't assume that you know what I meant.
Yeah. But so this comes to accountability, though, like what you were saying, and impact, because I don't need to make meaning out of your behavior, but I do need you to know the impact that behavior has on me. And then how you respond will determine if we can continue.
That's it. And if you don't share with me the impact that my behavior and my choices are having on you, regardless of my motive, how then do I have the option?
Exactly.
To either adjust my behavior or not. And that gets into a kind of passive aggression that I'm just like not willing to go.
No.
You know, so yeah. So like being able to put that out front, that these are certain qualities of my nature and qualities of of not only who I am to start, but who I am right now.
Yes.
How I'm showing up in my life right now. And if you are down with that, fantastic. If you're not, bless you, and let's know that now and just steer in different directions.
Yeah.
You know, and it's scary as hell because I constantly have that story that nobody wants that. That if I really show up like completely unapologetically and all the way underworld, emotionally intense, super deep truth teller, all that, it's going to be crickets.
I'm laughing because this has been my commitment to myself as I have been dating, is to not hold back. I also have the skill and ability to be so compassionate and so loving while at the same time being so honest. And
complexity.
Complexity. It is just not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. It's not even for most people. Because most people are cowards, Elizabeth. If we just get right back to it.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Let's go back to the beginning. Because when I feel like that truth telling coming on, I can put the clutch in. Or I can just be like, booyah, here it is.
Here it is.
And then I watch them be like, and then either they put the clutch in and say it's okay when it's not, or whatever they say, right?
Yeah.
Their response is over here and then their real feelings are over here.
Mm-hmm.
Or they come and meet me.
Yeah.
And I have a much smaller, like my life emptied out in the wake of the relationship. And I have a lot of grief about that. And I have also been realizing the vast majority of those people would not be a good fit for me anymore.
Yeah.
Like there would be so many clutches going in that there would be the possibility of a relationship.
Open up a clutch factory.
Clutch factory. I'm serious. And then you spend all your energy holding down all those clutch pedals. Anyone who has ever driven a manual car in serious rush hour traffic knows exactly what I'm talking about.
I haven't.
So
but it
much
sounds
effort.
Miserable.
So much effort. You literally, like your left foot is like holding the clutch down for like 2 hours. This is when we do this psychologically, we have to hold the pedal down that keeps that clutch in because it's our natural condition to tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's the natural state of the human being to tell the truth. Animals tell the truth. Animals do not lie.
Right.
And so when we start disconnecting ourselves from our truth, it takes energy. And that is like, we have to allocate the energy to do that. And the more clutches you have in your life, the less energy, the less energy you have available for anything real.
That's great. So I want to get to the whole reason we're even having this conversation.
Okay.
I wrote this Facebook post a couple weeks ago now at this point about the heart. I posted this beautiful artwork of the heart. We'll put it on the show notes page. And I'm going to read what I wrote. I'm going to read what you wrote, and then we're going to talk about it. Cool?
Jam.
So there's going to be a lot of me reading here for a moment. So the stunning piece of art is by a woman named Bianca Green, artist. And I spotted it on someone's Instagram feed and was so drawn in, I had to go digging for the artist. I've been on a journey into and through my heart this year, so it makes sense, not that it needs to. I've been exploring my heart's mysteries, terrain, and wisdom in ways I hadn't before because I couldn't. She was walled up and overprotected, for good reason, but the time was up for such reasoning. I've been letting people in over the last several months in ways I just didn't have the capacity to before. It feels really good, and also there are moments of terror. What if they crush me? My logical mind worries. The answer from my heart is always something like, so be it. You've been crushed before, love. Look how much stronger, softer, wiser, and lovelier it's made you. There's much more to say, but that feels sufficient for now. Where's your heart at lately? Tell me about it. So that's what I wrote. And then you wrote this. I've been talking a lot with my practitioner about the difference between repair and regeneration. My heart and my whole life shattered into a million billion pieces 2 years ago, and I kept hoping and expecting, and having other people expecting, that it would repair. It didn't. It died. Everything died. But as it turns out, if you just stay with it, just be dead, for long enough, tiny green shoots start to emerge up through the rotting remains. Having that expectation of repair, especially from other people, was so damaging. I spent a lot of this process in total bewilderment and deep struggle, not just because of how hard it is to die that thoroughly and still have to keep living in a body, but because I had a completely mistaken understanding of what was actually happening. The shoots are still minuscule, so I have no idea what it means or what it's going to look like. I'm largely still in the dark. The rotting remains still stink pretty bad, but the shoots are there finally, just enough to see that they're real and not a delusion. So there's a new incarnation within an incarnation coming. I have a very strong feeling that the shape of my new heart is going to be radically different than the one that died, but we'll have to wait and see. I loved it. The part I loved the most was because of how hard it is to die that thoroughly and still have to keep living in a body. Can we start there?
You bet. It's, and again, I'm going to go back to the way in which our culture does not support this.
Yeah.
I'm minded of something that I heard that, again, I don't have direct references for, but I believe this to be accurate, that in some of the Scandinavian cultures, if we go back, probably Middle Ages or even before, there was a house in the village that was called the Ash House or the House of Ashes. And a woman, particularly who had lost a child or lost a husband, would go live in the Ash House. She was acknowledged by her whole community to be in the ashes, and they would feed her. And I know it just gives me shivers. Like I needed that.
Some people are listening, not watching, because we only post the videos on YouTube now, but I just did like a whole body, like zing, like hit me.
That's the thing. I needed to be in the Ash House, and so did you. And we don't have that available.
No.
And so we have to keep working. You and I are privileged, and also we have earned work that we love with every fiber of our being. And that's the only thing that made it possible for me to keep showing up into my work.
1,000%.
During this time. But it would have been really lovely if I didn't have to. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I needed, because when you die, I kind of run out of words. I mean, we get into the territory of the underworld here.
Yeah.
There were many, many, many days when I could not function. I cried all day. And my body would kind of like give up after a little while, because you really can only sob hysterically for a certain period of time. But then I was just like,
Yeah.
and then the tears would well up again. And then I would be like, and that was my day.
Yeah.
And I spent cumulatively over these 2 years, I spent months like that.
Yeah.
But when you still have to, pay your rent or your mortgage, buy yourself food, make yourself food, sort of, maintain, you're aware that like a lot of other things around you are dying, because when you're dead, it's really hard to kind of keep connections and relationships in your life, and you feel them slipping away, and you're like, shit, I don't know if that's something I want to lose. I don't have a hell of a lot left, but you can't. You just can't do it. But the people around you don't understand, because we have such a violent aversion to true grief in this culture. And so when I started, after about 6 months of like the devastation of my entire life, people started saying, well, you need to get past it. Like, you need to move on. I know. Can you just be like, excuse me? But I didn't. I was too injured to even be able to do that. And then, of course, I interjected that, and I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I not picking myself up, getting myself back on my feet, moving forward, doing all these things people are telling me that I need to do?
People who did not just have the experience you had.
Yeah. But even for, I don't know. I mean, there's no hierarchy of grief.
No.
I think that's another thing we do that's really unfair. But you really are dead. And yet you still have to get up and move your body or not, and suffer the consequences, But I didn't have an ash house that I could go live in. I didn't have people who would provide housing and food for me, the basics of keeping the body alive, while that which was within me was dead. And in my archetypal work, one of the things that I do work a lot with people is this death and rebirth process. But I talk about how we like to talk about it as death and rebirth. Like it really happens like that. And what I always emphasize to people, because the death is like, dying is an active process. It's agonizing. Absolutely agonizing, but it's an active process. You're dying. You feel the blood leaking out. You feel everything just like falling away. And the rebirth is the part everybody loves. We're good with that. What nobody talks about is the and. When people don't make it, it's the and that kills them. And I won't go again. I could go deeply into this, but we have so much mythic structure. Everything from Jesus, 3 days in the cave, Odin, 9 days on the cross, Inanna, the descent of Inanna, which is one of the oldest myths we have. It goes on, where there's a dying and then there's a being dead. And in many myths, in many myths, there's a hanging. Jesus on the cross too, right? There's a hanging. We're suspended between death and rebirth. And in myth, that hanging goes on a long time. In life, when we die and we get to the and, we hang for a long time. And nobody ever wants to talk about the hanging. That's where I've been for most of 2 years. That's where you were, without doubt.
Yeah. So last year I left. I went to Europe. I was like, I gotta go. And I didn't realize, this is what I appreciate about what I call my wild soul, my higher self, whatever is the force that guides me, inner wisdom, is I just knew I had to book this trip. And I didn't know why. And it wasn't until I got there and I spent time in 3 different countries where primarily I speak a good amount of Spanish, and I was in Spain in a few different areas, but in Portugal and in France, I don't speak the language. And I realized, I did this for myself because I can't talk to people for a couple of weeks at least, other than transactional conversations. I need people. I can't be in this town where this relationship happened, where every coffee shop I go to or every grocery store I go to, I'm going to see a person who only knew me as being in this relationship, right? I need to go to a place where no one knows who the hell I am. No one gives a shit. No one knows what's like, I could be dead. That's exactly what I let myself be dead. I didn't wear makeup. And the irony, this is great. I had a friend who had backpacked in Europe, and I really wanted to travel carry on. She's like, just wear it. Just only bring black, because it can stay. You can let it go the longest without washing it, and it'll all go together. So I literally traveled around Europe for 5 weeks, other than running my retreat, talking to no one, with a suitcase full of only black clothes. I was dead.
And I love that, because the solid advice about only black is good travel advice, but there was deeper mythic wisdom in that for you, right? You know, you had to be in your own ash house. You had to craft your own ash house. And the place where my heart breaks is for all the people who can't. Do that.
Can't, like, literally have to go back to work or have to take care of 3 children or
both, all.
Yeah.
You know? And so supporting this it's become so much of the work that I do now, partly because I've lived through it. And I'm just the tiny green shoots are really still only coming through the decaying corpse of my old being. But I can look someone straight in the face and straight in the soul.
Yeah.
Who is hanging and rotting, and be like, I'm right here with you.
Yeah.
And it takes as long as it takes. And I know people say that, but you got to really mean it when you say it. Because 2 fucking years of this, like, it's like, how on earth can this take this long? And then when I start to access the wisdom of other cultures, they're like, what are you even talking about? 2 years? You're only in the beginning stages.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh God. And then it goes back to capacity, right? It goes back to that capacity. But you also said a really important thing about your experience that I think we also don't talk about, Elizabeth, which is identity. And I'm not going to go on to a long rant about it, but I work with identity on an archetypal level. So identity is way, way, way deeper than most people work with or realize or understand.
Right.
It's not about the roles we play in the world. It's about who we are at the deepest level of our being. And it does change. It changes a lot. And when we go through a crisis, there's always a change in identity, but we don't have the means to work with that. And other people don't like it when we change our identity. They don't like keeping up with that shift. And they want to hold us in that shape that they knew and that was familiar and that was comfortable for them. And when we go through a death, to say that our identity changes is the understatement of the year. And so you did one of the most instinctively, and I love that you just are so connected with that deep self, whatever that is, that you knew that one of the things you had to do was get the hell away from everyone who knew you as that person. And that was part of being in the ash house for you that allowed this profound and incredibly powerful new articulation of your identity to come forth the way that it is. And there are people who don't like that and they're sloughing off.
Yeah. Yeah. And, part of that, like you and I spoke a little bit offline before I hit the record button about a lot of the new age spiritual bypassing kind of, call it a trend or call it whatever you want to call it. You would be way more articulate than me in this moment. But there was a part of me that questioned myself during that time I kept hearing that little saying, you take yourself with you wherever you go. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I was like, am I just running away? Am I just delaying the inevitable? I'm going to have to go back and face it eventually. But I wasn't running from as you're saying this, I'm realizing like a deeper aspect of the experience was, no, I was being dead.
Yes.
I had to go.
Yes.
And the other thing I keep thinking of as we talk about this, have you seen The Princess Bride?
Not in a long time, but I have. I've read the book many times.
The Billy Crystal, like medicine man character. Mm-hmm. That's like, he's mostly dead.
Yep.
That's what
I love that because the way they handled that was so contextual. How can you be mostly dead?
Yeah.
And yet that's actually way closer to what actually happens. We're not made of on-off switches.
Yeah.
And we go through, fortunately, most of us don't have to go through it more than, 3, 4, 5 times in a good long human life, but we all do. We all go into the underworld, whether we walk or we're dragged at some point, usually a few times.
Yeah.
And we are dead. You die. They call it death and rebirth.
Yeah.
And we sort of grudgingly understand the death part a little. We love the rebirth part. It's the and that just floors us. And yet that's the core of the experience. We have to let ourselves be dead for as long as we are.
Yeah.
It's like we can't force forgiveness. We can't force rebirth.
And I do want to spend, as we wrap up, I'd love to spend the rest of our time on how you would distinguish between those other two R words, repair and regeneration.
Okay. Repair, as I understand it, and I haven't done the etymological. See, now I'm like, I should have done my etymological research before I talk to you. Repair is to return a system to a former state of functioning. There's damage to a system. The damage needs to be eliminated so that the system can go back to the way it was before.
I just looked it up for you. It is
Okay.
you even said it better than the dictionary. The verb is fix or mend a thing suffering from damage or a fault. And the noun is the action of fixing or mending something.
Yep. And I think that mending really gets to it. When we have a tear in something, we sew it up.
Yeah.
So repair is like a broken leg. Okay, you be in a cast, whatever, your leg gets back, you walk again. Regeneration is literally growing a new being.
Yep, the action or process of regenerating or being regenerated, in particular, the formation of a new animal or plant tissue.
That's it.
Yeah.
And, regeneration of tissue is a smaller version of that. When we're going through this kind of interior, well, it's interior and exterior, this kind of death and rebirth, we literally have to grow a new being. And this is part of the reason why there's a difference in scope, a difference in time frame, a difference in amount of energy invested, a difference in the impact on the rest of your life. Because repair is you just are good and do the thing you need to do for a much shorter period of time, but the system remains intact. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
the system of the person, the system of their lives, their relationships, kind of this whole ecosystem of the person remains fundamentally intact. There's just this wound. And once that kind of knits itself up, it's basically good. In regeneration, the whole ecosystem dies.
Yes.
And then something new has to grow, but regeneration takes enormously more time, more energy, more investment, and more patience.
The patience part, for me, is excruciating.
Amen, sister. Or as I say, ashe, ashe, ashe. Because, it's just, I've lost count of the number of times in the last 2 years that I've either been raging or sobbing, which are sometimes both. Why am I still here?
Yeah.
Why am I not better yet? Why I just don't want to feel this way anymore, and then I just keep coming back to it's an organic process and it takes as long as it takes.
And of course you're never still anywhere because you've come beyond where you were before.
Yes. And sometimes that progress is always happening.
Yeah.
It's totally organic, and sometimes it's hard to see.
It's totally
And so if we had this model, and I'm so profoundly grateful to the people, the few but the mighty, who have been completely with me in this process and have kept reminding me of this regeneration understanding. Right? Because that is what has allowed me, when it doesn't feel like there's any green shoots going on, and it's been a long time, in my view, that it's happening.
It is happening.
That change is happening, but we've got to stay with it. And I think a lot of people, when we're in that long drawn out they give up. I came so close to giving up. I mean, I really was like teetering on the ledge 60 stories up probably 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people who give up and check out, that's where they are.
Yeah.
And they don't know that they're regenerating.
Yeah. So as we are wrapping up this conversation, sometimes in conversations, there are moments when I could feel like we're not recording this in real time. No one's actually listening yet. It's just me and you here right now. But I can feel them listening later, having this moment of being like your life flash is before your eyes. And you think of the times when you were trying to repair, but you needed regeneration. And you're like, oh. So now that we all know this. And I'm really glad that you also just like didn't let it slide, that we all have access to different resources, different levels and quality of support. So when it comes to being dead, we are able to handle it. However, we are able to handle it. And that is not going to be an even playing field experience for everyone.
I think that's critical. I really do think it's critical because we largely lack the village.
We lack the village. That's right.
I think the absence of because the village is what makes that possible. And in healthy village cultures, however we want to frame that, in whatever parts of the world that people do this, there's a kind of a fluidity that allows someone, I'm going to go back to the Scandinavian example, that allows someone to be in the ash house.
Yeah.
And everybody else has to do just a little bit more. I mean, just like 1% more. But when everybody does 1% more, there's enough to cover whoever's in the ash house. And not everybody's in the ash house at the same time.
No.
But we do not have access to that in most of the Western world. And in certain ways, I think America most of all. Women more than anyone. Women of color, 1,000 million times more. Although at times they have access to other communities that we don't.
Yeah.
A lot of white women. But I also want to emphasize that wealth and privilege are not a protection from being dead. And they can often make it worse because people feel so concreted into this image that they have to present to maintain and talk about giving something up. Talk about the clutch. For them to actually acknowledge that they are dead, they would almost probably they would give up the entirety, their marriage, their community, their parent group, because those folks can't handle it.
Yeah. I read something recently. I'm going to botch the quote and I forget exactly where I saw it, but it said, let me be clear, having privilege doesn't mean that someone has no problems in their life. It just means that their problem is not racism.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It doesn't mean that things aren't hard for you, but there's all these other layers.
Yeah.
If you're a woman of color, and the misogyny and the racism and the classism that all gets layered on that.
Yeah.
It's like extra layers of suffering. But no, not being a woman of color, in a person who has different abilities, who's trans, who's, the people that are kind of outside
on the margins
of what we are willing to see. It doesn't mean they don't suffer.
Right.
If you're not those things, but you don't suffer in those ways. And those are always extra. Those are always added on.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a particular, I could go down that route and I probably won't, just because I know we're trying to wrap up. But the thing that I know is that the underworld comes for all of us.
Yeah.
And there is nothing.
It's coming. Let's end the interview on that. It's coming for you, sucker.
Okay. I would rather tell the truth about that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to happen to you, whether you know that's what's happening to you or not. I would rather that you know. And when the underworld comes for you, nothing gets you exempt from that.
Yeah.
There is no get out of jail free card. Nothing. Because this is fundamental to the human condition.
And it's not something to live in fear of, because I'll say, having come out of my own underworld in the last couple of years, I would do that shit again to get to be here.
I struggle with that. And just so that everyone hearing it knows that you don't always are not like, yay, look at how much better I am.
I'm not over here like dancing around saying yay. I'm just saying.
No. But when I come, how I connect with the truth of that is when I imagine, because there's definitely still a place where a lot of me wishes it had gone differently.
Mm-hmm.
But when I imagine having to give up who I've become,
yes,
it is an unequivocal no.
Yep.
Every cell in my whole body just like leans back. It's like, nope.
Yep.
You know, and that's why it's worth it. It's like I keep wanting to help people understand why it's worth it to give up whatever you have to give up to stay in truth and in integrity. The transformation that comes in these underworld experiences is some of the most profoundly generative. Remember, generative is in regeneration.
Yep.
It is this growth of a deeper and richer life and being that is worth anything. It's worth anything. But people don't realize how long and how excruciating the process can be so that they can stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I want them to know.
Well,
and you and I can both say, testify. It's worth it.
Now you know.
Hang in.
This was so good. Let's do this 5 more times and talk about all the rest of the threads that I didn't get to pull.
Anytime.
Where can the good listeners find you?
The good listeners can find me at KarenHawkwood.com. And it's Karen, Karen. Hawkwood is like bird on a tree. HAWKWOOD.
Cool. So super great. Thank you so much. As always, I appreciate your way of examining things, articulating things, not being above anything. Anyone listening, share this interview. Like I said, you're going to want to listen to this one. I mean, I want to listen to it with my journal 3 or 4 times. So I know you're going to want to do that too. I will listen to it again. I know that, this will be one of those things that people tell me, I use this with my clients. I send this to my friend. Like, I gave it to whoever. Like, and I do want to say something. Actually, for if you know someone who's dead right now, I don't know that you want to send them the interview. What do you think about that? Sometimes when people are in like fresh grief or fresh death, it's just like, just hug them. Just be with them. Like, don't try to pile on the advice yet. What do you think of that?
I think it's motive. Cool. And this goes back to kind of what you were asking me before. There's 2 things that I'm thinking. If it's an attempt to manage, what they're feeling, please don't feel that you have to manage anybody else's experience.
Yeah.
Ever, not through this, not through anything. Just be with them and manage your own experience.
Yes.
Of their grief and of their raw loss.
Yeah.
Here's though what I know. I needed people to see the truth and say the truth of what I was experiencing. Yes. That I was messy, that I was dead, that I was rotting. Like, I used that language in my comment to you very intentionally.
Yeah. Because
talking about rotting is so unsexy. It doesn't feel spiritual to a lot of people. It's not, but it is the truth.
Yeah.
And so if you know someone who maybe is thinking she should be repairing when really what she is dead, then she might really hear herself in this and feel seen and feel like that's it. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And
cool.
So if you're there or you know someone who's there who needs to be seen, who needs to have this regeneration framework, please. But grief, there's no shortcut to grief. Yeah. This is not about getting around grief. It's actually about honoring it and staying in it.
And I keep trying to end the conversation, and it's so hard because I want to keep going. But I just want to reemphasize one more thing. Manage your own experience of the other person's grief. That is the jam.
That is the jam.
Do that. So, okay, we're really wrapping it up here. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all the things, and we'll see you later.
And it's interesting because when you look at what people say they want and then what they actually marry sometimes is the opposite of what they've said, and their patterns always were the same. So they were almost never dating their husband or wife. They were dating the opposite of their husband and wife. And then they come to me and they're like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, you're not dating what what you said you wanted. You're dating the exact opposite of what you said. And it happens for both men and women.